institution. Brendan?
Evening, friends. Sometimes I've been in Limerick, but it's very nice to be here. I would agree with Ed that you should have a go at reading it. It's not easy to get hold of that. If you ring up the Department of Foreign Affairs press office, they'll send you out the consolidated treaties, or you can look at it online. Alternatively, you can brief yourself in advance by having a look at this. We don't have many copies of this left. We produced it last year, which deals with the aspects of the treaty that are most problematic. There are lots of parts of the treaty that are problematic, and this tries to deal with the aspects that are most problematic. You can download it from our website, sayno.ie. Unfortunately, we don't have many hard copies. I'm going to deal with the argument that Lisbon is necessary for your jobs. Who's here out of work? Anybody? Who's here's got a job? Most of them got a job. A few people not got a job. But there are many people worried about their jobs. Yeah. Don't worry, Lisbon will sort it all out for you. Right. Deadly buzz. One thing that's worth remembering in all of this is that in July this year, the Chief Executive of the IDA, Industrial Development Authority, Barry O'Leary, reported on the rate of inward investment, foreign direct investment into Ireland last year. And that was up 14%. In 2008, it was up 14% over 2007. It was 14% more inward investment in Ireland in 2008 than there was in 2007. So you could sort of say that back to people who said, oh, the jobs will go, the jobs will go. If we don't vote yes, the jobs will go. The investors will stay as long as the rate of corporation tax remains as it is, and as long as the regulations are lax. And this government and the EU is keen on that model. I read earlier this week on some of the tax returns, corporate tax returns, when they're talking about increasing taxes. Are they talking about increasing taxes on the foreign multinationals? No, they're not. Foreign multinationals last year paid 2.5 billion in taxes, but they only pay at the rate of 12.5%, which means they banked 17.5 billion in profits. 17.5 billion in profits last year, banked by foreign multinationals. Colin McCarthy is talking about 5 billion in cuts in public services this year, 3 billion next year, 3 billion the year after, and whatever down the line. So you think about what the foreign multinationals are banking in profits. And then think about who's working for them. Well, there's that well-known computer programmer, Cat Cox. Pat Cox is a consultant for Microsoft. He's a consultant for Pfizer. He's a consultant for Michelin. He works for the lobbying organisation APCO, which has its big headquarters in Brussels. Of course, Pat doesn't lobby anybody. Being the ex-president of the European Parliament, etc., and working on getting paid by these multinationals, he wouldn't be telling them how to do things at all. Of course not. He says it himself, I keep my job separate. So think about who's pushing for this. Anyhow, on the economic stuff, in my view, the economic crisis has its roots, the current economic crisis has its roots in the liberalisation of the Irish economy, indeed the world economy, and the European economy, certainly since the Single European Act 1992. Liberalisation is allowing external, non-national companies to work in the national economy and the European economy. And what goes with liberalisation is deregulation, the removal of regulations on the operation, particularly financial services. To the extent that the Irish Financial Services Centre up in the docks in Dublin is known as international offshore. It's so deregulated it's in competition with the Cayman Islands for corruption. So they're the two aspects of the crash. They're also the creator of the boom. You know, lots of money going out to people, lots of fast money being made in dodgy operations that were bound to come unstuck. It's what Charlie McCreevy calls light touch regulation. In other words, don't touch regulation. That's the substance of it. So we have We had a boom, but we also had what's called a polarization of incomes. Some people got very rich, a lot of people stayed much the same. We had huge profits, increased profits for transnationals, 20 billion last year. And we had a rise in privatization of public services. I don't know if there are any American companies running private hospitals here, but there's a big increase in American companies running private hospitals. This is a terrible scandal. Your privately operated hospitals getting paid by the National Treatment Purchase Fund to send people in who can't be treated in the public service. So the private hospitals are being paid more for giving the same treatment, and the money's been starved of the public service. Many of these companies have a record of fraud, paying big fraud fines in the USA. I noticed last week there was a half-page advert in the Independent for Fresenius. Fresenius operates dialysis service. In fact, it has the whole dialysis contract for the Southwest. Fresenius was fined $900 million in 2006 in the US for medical fraud. These are the people who are getting the contracts. They're meant to be regulated. But HICWA, people know what HICWA means. Who knows what HICWA means? Come on, hand up. It's the Health Inspector and Equality Authority. It's the body that's meant to regulate the health service. There's no regulation in HICWA. There's no remit. HICWA has no remit to regulate private hospitals. It regulates public hospitals, nursing homes, and private nursing homes after it leaves Cross, not private hospitals. There's no regulation of private hospitals. So you can set up a private hospital, or the builders can build private hospitals as they're doing in Cork. Mick knows about this. Run them. You don't have to report on your accidents. You don't have to report how many people died. You don't have to report on things that went wrong. No regulation. Light touch. Anyhow, a lot of that's going on, and that actually falls in with the EU's model. Because the EU lauded the Irish economy as a model for others. Only a couple of years ago, we were lauding the Irish economy as a model for others. Now that we have a crash, and the government is bailing out the banks, or rather the shareholders in the banks, the people who own shares in the banks, and other banks who loan to Irish banks, the Irish are bailing those out. The EU says that this structure is also okay, because you're keeping the bankers going. The people at the thin end, who are suffering the cuts, no comment about those. So it's interesting that the EU, the European Central Bank, have accepted the NAMA model, but they're also behind, or partly responsible for, the cuts in Colin McCarthy's proposals. He admits it himself. The reason for the severity of the cuts is that under the Stability and Growth Pact, the Irish deficit, in other words, spending more than it's got in income, that has to come back down to certain levels by 2013. That's what the European Commission says. It could be, we could bring down the deficit if need be. I'm not sure, I wouldn't go along with it, but it could be done over a longer period, and the cuts wouldn't be so severe. But because of the Stability and Growth Pact, which is in Lisbon as Protocol 12, the terms are in there, it's necessary to bring in a much sharper rate of cuts. So we have cuts going on at a time when there's mass unemployment and economic depression. What's historically been the solution to recession? Anybody know what Keynesianism is?